Alright, nothing glamorous here, but here's my old bench. Basically it's MDF top. It's got the metal base with a cabinet door on the left side and some drawers on the right, which is great for storage. And over there is the machinist vise. Great for holding certain things, not necessarily wood. One of the ways I would usually try to hold wood down is using one of these wooden clamps. And I would basically clamp that down to the bench here in such a way that this back jaw was flush with the top, and then I could drop a piece, your workpiece, right in here, tighten it up, and do some work. And if I needed one on the other side, I would go ahead and do that. But as you can see, though, I only got maybe an inch or so underneath the bench here where you could do any sort of clamping. So not really an ideal solution. So that's why I decided it was time for an upgrade. Hey folks, welcome back. As you saw from the introduction to this video, I decided it was time for a workbench upgrade. Besides being challenged in the work holding department, even when I was able to get cobble together some solution to get a piece of wood held down securely to work on, doing the actual work on it, the bench was actually very wobbly as well. So long story short, I've decided to do a Nicholson style workbench. It's also known as an English joiner's workbench. And you can find some details on this in Christopher Schwarz's book, Workbenches from Design and Theory to Construction and Use. And in that book, he cites the original source of the Nicholson bench by Peter Nicholson. It was in Mechanic's Companion that was published in 1831. A couple of reasons I chose this style is, much like the Roubeau, it's kind of a clean slate type of bench where you can tweak and customize your particular build to what your actual needs will be. But it doesn't require quite as much cash outlay. So for this bench I used 2x12 Doug fir and 4x6s for the legs and stretches. So that's one of the characteristics of this bench, is that you can use construction grade lumber for this project. So and it sticks to the same rules that Christopher Schwarz outlines, where your workbench should be a three-dimensional work holding surface. So keeping the aprons flush to the legs and whatnot will allow that to happen. So I decided to do a split top style, so much very similar to the Roubeau, the split top Roubeau. For instance, that you can find on the Woodworking Guild. It'll allow for a gap stop in the middle that can double as a place to hold chisels or your back saw, or you can raise it up and use it as a planing stop as well. So. Alright, so let's get started with the actual beginning of the construction. What I did was I chose Morrison Tenon Joinery in the 4x6s to join the stretches and whatnot to the legs. And what I did there was marked out where these mortises would be, and then I hogged out most of the material using my drill press and a force and a bit. And then took chisels and squared up each of the mortises. Now I cut the thickness of the tenons on each of the other pieces at the table saw using a dado stack. So that was to cut the thickness. But I then realized this was a golden opportunity to practice some hand sawing techniques. So to saw the other dimension of the tenons to their proper length, I broke out the bad axe and went to town. And I have to say that was just really fun to do. It was the saw cuts great, and it was just a great way to practice some hand sawing techniques. And by the time I got to that last mortise, I felt pretty comfortable with my technique. Not perfect by any means, but definitely was a good learning experience for me. So moving on, I then fit each of the mortises and tenons together. Now, just to account for any sort of human error in that process, I went and paired up and wrote down each mortise and tenon, so they would be paired up for the most ideal fit, and then final glue up and assembly, and then we move on to the next step. Alright, so after the glue is dried on each of the leg assemblies glue up, I brought each one over to the table saw, and with the dado stacks set at the same height as the thickness of the aprons, I went ahead and cut notches out of each of the legs, so that would ensure that the aprons would be flush with the remainder of the leg as when the bench was standing. So once those notches were cut, it was then time to get the aprons ready for attachment to each of the leg assemblies. Okay, so for the aprons, while not everyone does this, I tend to like the look of having the corners clipped off. Plus, it would kind of save, like if you bang into the bench, you won't get a corner right in the leg. So I went ahead and clipped the corners off, and then it was time to decide, where the apron would sit along each of the leg assemblies. Now, I could have put each of the leg assemblies the same distance from the end of the bench, but I decided to move the left leg assembly in some because I'm right-handed, so my face vise will be on the left side, and I wanted to have enough room on the left side of the bench to accommodate for my face vise being as far down the end as possible. So that's why you'll see that the leg assemblies aren't exactly symmetrical or equidistant, if might be a better way to say that, from each of the ends of the bench. So to actually attach the aprons to the legs, I wanted to keep the look of the aprons as clean as possible. So everything is attached from the unseen side. So for the legs, it would be from the inside of the legs into the back side of the apron. So that was done using screws and a little bit of glue. And also for reinforcement, I used some little 1.5-inch cleats that I cut using just regular everyday construction spruce that we find here in the Northeast. And use that as a reinforcement as well. So with that said, it's now starting to look a lot like a bench. Alright, I think this is a good point to wrap up this first video. In the next video, we'll take a look at attaching the top to what we now have as our beginning of the bench assembly. So thanks guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.